Hume said, well, actually, something which is most beautiful is that which doesn't attempt to be functional in that regard. They're called disinterested pleasure, but he doesn't really offer reasons why that may be the case, and it's heavily criticized. So, really and truly, what counts as art? What counts as art? Art can be divided into two: natural beauty and non-natural beauty. Right? This is what it is. But then, really and truly, the question is: are actions art? And the reason why I bring this to your attention is there's a very interesting hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ was walking with Aisha radiallahu anha, yeah? And then a group of Jewish people came, and they were started to attack the Prophet. Assalamu alaikum. That is, may death be upon you. And then Aisha responded, and she started attacking that group of people, and she said, and upon you and this and that, and she attacked them. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave her advice. And this is a interesting hadith which relates to the discussion on beauty. He says, مَا كَانَ الرِّفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ وَمَا نُزِعَ الرِّفْقُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. That rifq, or this idea of gentleness, it wasn't in something unless it made it beautiful. And it wasn't removed from something unless it made it ugly, effectively. So here, there's an indication from the prophetic hadith that actions can have beauty. And our claim as Muslim people is not just that the behavior of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the best behavior, or the most functional behavior, or the most guidance, but it's the most beautiful behavior as well. We are making an argument from beauty. We are saying that it's the most beautiful behavior, because if we accept that virtuous actions are counted as actions, then the pinnacle of that then is the most beautiful of behavior. It does tazyin, it literally adorns the behavior. It's something good to look at. And that's why Wittgenstein, a very famous philosopher, he said that beauty is something you know it when you see it. Likewise, when you see good behavior or a virtuous behavior at the pinnacle, you know it when you see it. You don't need to have any training in philosophy or art or anything else. You know it when you see it. And that's why a lot of people convert to Islam, and that's why it's a missing part of our da'wah. When people just witnessed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ behaving in a certain manner, it was intuitive to them that this behavior is the pinnacle of virtuous action. And you don't need to have training in any field to know that. It's because it's the you call the golden mean, and we'll discuss what that means in a second, in the section that follows. But it's the golden mean of all behaviors. It's the way he carried himself was exactly right, and to get that as a human being is extremely difficult. In fact, impossible. You could argue, impossible for another human being to we would argue, to replicate the fine balance that existed in the behavior of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But before we get to the behavior, we need to talk about some of the physical descriptions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and we will actually read hadiths out, because I think when we talk about the seerah and stuff like that, I should say, there's a lot of discussion about the seerah, and obviously, like, we know that the seerah authors, that they were much more lenient in terms of the gradation of hadith. But for our purposes, since we're making arguments, and we're making an intellectual case, I think it's only right for us to know the gradation of hadith. So I'm going to read it in translation, a lot of these hadiths, and then we'll discuss maybe a couple of things like that. But it's a good habit for us to actually read the actual hadith itself, or at least a translation of it. And this is, mashallah, it's a very good book. It's, I think, recently been translated of Shama'il Muhammadiyya into English language. And it's called A Portrait of the Prophet. You can buy it online. It's actually a very good translation. I commend the translator. It's good work that's been done on it. So we'll do that. Obviously, this book has hadiths which are different gradations. Where people would consider that, okay, Tirmidhi. But Tirmidhi didn't, like, whether in his Jama' or this book or any other book, he didn't attempt to put all the Sahih hadith in one place. Which means that you actually have to go through that, like, you have to have an awareness of what this hadith is. There's some kalam on it, there's not kalam on it, or whatever. So we'll try and do that as much as possible in what follows. But just I'll try and paint a picture quickly of how the Prophet ﷺ actually looked. How did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ actually look? So there are some things which I think it's better for us to say that is sahih to a high level, which means the authentication of hadith is undisputable or undoubtable, which is the following: that he wasn't that tall and he wasn't that short. Some hadiths, as we're going to cover, say he was taller than the average man. He was taller than the average man, but he wasn't extremely tall. Now, what does that look like? I mean, what are you going to put? What's the height there? To be honest with you, in 1,400 years, I don't think the height of the Arab people is going to change that much. You could say a few inches here and there, possibly, as an average. And obviously, if you have a smaller population, the mean is going to be different because the extremities are eliminated. I mean, if I asked the Arab people in, let's say, the Khalij region, which are most genetically similar to the Prophet, undoubtedly, yeah, someone will want to dispute that, but it's undisputable. It's most genetically similar. That the average height may be 5'8", 5'9". That's probably what it is. I mean, that's maybe even being generous. 5'9", let's just say, for the sake of argument. If we want to add a couple of inches, we could say 5'10", 5'11", because once again the extremities are eliminated. But that's about what we're talking about now. He's taller than the average man, so add a couple of inches to that. For the sake of argument, we'll come to the hadith that says he's taller than the average man because there's some discussion about that hadith. But for the sake of argument, if you add a couple of inches to that, he's anywhere between 5'10" and 6'2". I think that's fair. 5'9", 6'2". But I don't think he's anything but 6'2" and over in any society in the world, even in South Sudan or in Holland or whatever these countries that are seen as the tallest countries in the world, quote unquote, it would be seen as a tall man. 6'2" is seen as a tall man anywhere in the world at any time. Maybe if you go back 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, at that historical period beyond the antiquity, maybe the average was higher. Thamud times or whatever they want. Maybe 6'5" is the average, or 6'7" or 6'8". We'll come to the reason why that's an interesting thing. But first of all, that's probably the height, anywhere between 5'9" to 6'1". I think this is the range. He had wide shoulders. That's 100%. Everywhere you'll find this terminology is madbu'a, and this kind of big shoulders, the manakib are very wide, is mentioned. So this actually in the physiological field is referred to as mesomorphic frame, because there are three frames which are the archetypal frames. I'm not sure if you guys have come across them. Well, you might have come across them. One of them is called the ectomorph, who's a very tall man but very narrow. And then you have a mesomorph, who's kind of like not tall, not short, and he's quite wide. And the endomorph is a short man who gains fat very quickly. So short and fat. So by as we'll come to, the definition of this, he's not looking like a short man, and there's no protrusion from his stomach, as we'll see. The Prophet ﷺ, his chest and his stomach were in level with each other. Therefore, he's closer to what is referred to as the mesomorph. Now, of course, there are combinations. So you can have a tall man who's wide. That's called an ectomeso, effectively, because he's got traits of both. You can have an endomeso, because that person is more likely to get fat. But it seems through the, if you like, descriptions here, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had a mesomorphic frame. And I'll come to the advantage of that, because someone will say, why wasn't he a bit taller? Why wasn't he a bit more muscular? Because we're living in an age when young men are going to ask this question, especially, right? Because they see role models as bodybuilders and athletes. So they say, well, our Prophet, who was considered to be the top person, why wasn't he any more muscular than he was? Why wasn't he not like a bodybuilder, Ronnie Coleman or Jay Cutler? And we'll answer these questions in a bit, but it's interesting to ask to kind of put this first. So he didn't have a bulging belly. He had black eyes, and there was a contrast between the pupils and the white of the eye. So if you saw that, and if you've seen people that look like that, they stand out. And he had a thick, beautiful beard. Everyone, recognized that. And the lashes of the Prophet ﷺ were long. The lashes. And there's no doubt about it. When someone has long lashes, that looks beautiful on any gender. It looks fantastic. My daughter has beautiful long lashes. I like looking at her. And I love looking at just looking at those lashes. That people now go and relax their lashes. It's a fantastic trait to have. That contrast, it creates beauty. When someone looks at it, it's mesmerizing, in fact. And so you'll find a lot of the companions saying, I looked at the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I looked at the moon, and I realized that he was more beautiful than the moon and the sun. But for me, that's more of an indication of how much they thought the moon and the sun was beautiful than the Prophet himself. Because if you consider the fact, I think my children are more beautiful than the moon and sun, with all due respect. The point is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they didn't have the words to describe what they were looking at. They did consider him to be a very, very good-looking man, handsome and beautiful. When you look at his face, the beard, the distinction, the masculinity was there, the kindness that was there, gentleness was there. Some people even converted to Islam just looking at his face. They said this cannot be a face of a liar, and so on and so forth. But let's go back to the description. So his hair was long. For the most part, it was long. Obviously, he had different hairstyles because he went to Umrah and Hajj and he'd cut his hair. But it went all the way down to his kind of like his lobes. He had long hair. And that goes in line, like, you know, subhanAllah, when you see that kind of hair, when it's not too curly, it's not too straight and it's not too curly. There's a bit of curls and it's not too straight. And then you've got the beard going on as well. It's that fantastic blend of what is referred to usually. People consider it nowadays to be feminine traits, like lashes and hair. But when you have a little bit of that, the contrast it creates is actually, it makes someone look on a different level. Let me put something to you, right? I know this sounds controversial, but I'm going to put it to you anyway. Look at the men that most women find attractive. Look at them. Even in the West. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's actually more like the Leonardo DiCaprios, frankly. Why is that? Because they've got that contrast of what is seen as pretty, if you like, beautiful characteristics, and then the masculine characteristics as well. Obviously, there's a colonial element there. We'll talk about that. Why Leonardo DiCaprio, not a black man? There's a hyper push to try and create some beauty for the white man. But the white man can be beautiful. So can a black man, and so can any man from any race. The point is when you have that kind of that mix going on, that contrast, it creates a new level of beauty that is well recognized cross-culturally. Actually, in fact, if you go in most cultures, if you see those kind of mixes together, it creates a kind of a beautiful contrasted image. And his eyes, it had iktihal on it, or it seemed like there was a natural slight blackening of the, like if someone had put kuhl basically on the eye. So it creates that distinction, that contrast. It creates that even more. When you have that distinction, that contrast, you look at that and you think, this person's looking at me now. That's why a lot of these Sahaba, when they look at him, they felt a bit shy, actually. They couldn't even look at him in the face, because imagine someone with jet black eyes, with a white perimeter, long hair, big beard, and it's almost like, you know, the blackening of the eyes underneath, looking straight at you. Do you know what I mean? That is gonna catch your attention. You're gonna feel a bit shy, you're gonna feel embarrassed. And that's how they felt about the situation. His nose, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I looked at this because I wanted to know what the shape of his nose was. And the hadith that I came across is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said that it was basically Hasan, to be fair, yani. His nose was basically, it was effectively straight. However, there was a bit of an arch on his nose here, and that the point of the nose was small. It was a small pointy, like it wasn't bulging. It was a small, like effectively diqqat al-arnuba. That was called the diqqat al-arnuba. Yeah. So, there was a slight arch in his nose as well. So, this is a hadith which I've come across, which is actually Hasan as well. So now, what about his eyebrows? That's the question. What about his eyebrows? Now, I saw conflicting discussion. Is his eyebrows like what you would refer to as a monobrow, or is it one? Is it this or that? So I saw two different. The hadith of Ma'bad, which is very, I mentioned it here, but we're discussing about it. There's some discussion about the weakness of the hadith. I mean, but it's mentioned in almost every seerah book, you know. But Albani says that, for example, it could be made strong if you look at some other turuq and so on and so forth. But it's a very, very long hadith. And I'll just give you the gist of it because it's too long to read now. And because it hasn't reached a level of authenticity that is sahih, frankly, take it with a pinch of salt. But basically, it was a story of a particular woman. The Prophet ﷺ he was going by and he saw her, and then there was a particular sheep or a cow. Was it a cow or a sheep? It was a sheep, and he wanted to milk the sheep. And the woman said, "This sheep is gone. This sheep is weak and it's emaciated. It's a weak sheep. You're not going to get any milk out of it." So the Prophet ﷺ he came and he got the ina, the bottle, and he put the milk on and all. It was like a miracle of the Prophet ﷺ, and all the milk came into the thing, and it fed so many people. And the hadith says actually he was the last to drink, which shows you a bit of his khuluq as well. So he got everyone to drink, and then he was the last one to drink.